Hey everybody! So the word of the day today is veneer. That's what we're going to be working on in this video, is putting this piece of veneer on this server buffet. So this buffet was a piece that I was commissioned to do some restoration work on and then give a new finish to be used in their half bath as a bathroom vanity. So if veneer work is something that you've always been curious about but maybe felt a little intimidated by, stick around and I'll show you that process in this video. Step is obviously removal of the damaged veneer. I did not record that part because I feel like it is a little bit more of a tedious, drawn out process, and it's very straightforward. An oral explanation of the process is more than enough for you to be able to do it on your own. So as we all have seen, usually it's right around the edges where the veneer is going to be lifted. And in that case, what you would do, the first thing you want to do is just get rid of all of the loose veneer that's already lifted and that you can just pop off of it. Get all of that off. A lot of times if you use this blade to slide it up under there, you can get more off than what you think is lifted. Usually it's loose further in than what you can see. Then what you want to do is use your razor blade and score it. A lot like you would score wallpaper when you're removing it. So you're just making like a mesh grid and scoring it as much or as little as you want. The more you score it, I will say, the better effect you're going to have, because what that does is it allows the water to get up underneath and penetrate to the wood glue and soften it to where you can remove it a little bit easier. So these are your tools. I'll go ahead and tell you that. I already mentioned the razor blade. These two doodads, these guys, your putty knife and a hammer. The hammer would be for the more stubborn areas that are a little bit stuck a little bit tighter. Water and a towel. You want the towel to be completely soaked when you're using it. And warm water does work a little bit better. So warm water, soak the towel, let it sit on there, keep soaking the towel, and it will sort of do its magic and activate and soften up the wood glue. And you'll use this and just kind of keep working it until you get it all off. Sometimes when you're working on a little more stubborn piece, it may bring a piece of this up with the veneer. If that happens, what you want to do is get some wood epoxy or wood putty and fill that in and then sand it smooth again. What you're going for is a flush surface to put the new veneer on. So what you want is when you're putting the new veneer on there, if you have a void in there, it's not going to adhere, it's going to cause problems down the road. So you really want to have a flush, smooth surface, all surfaces meeting one another. And so then the next step would be, once all of the veneer is removed, you can't have any residue of the glue, the old glue left on there. So you're going to get a sander and sand all of that off of it. I've already done that. This looks a little bit darker actually because I did throw some stain on there to show the client, because sometimes when you remove the veneer, you're like, that's beautiful wood under there. Why the heck did you put veneer on top of that? But in this case, there ended up being a little bit more variation in the wood tones than we were looking for. So we're wanting more of a uniform look to it, and we're opting to do the re-veneering on this piece. But sometimes you don't have to. Sometimes it's just gorgeous the way it is. So anyway, this part is prepped. That is the steps for removing the veneer, and we'll move on to the next step, which is adding the glue to the veneer. Okay, so I finished that step, which is applying an evenly distributed amount of glue to both the tabletop surface and the veneer surface, the underneath part of the veneer surface. Then I had to let that sit for 30 or 40 minutes until it dried, almost to the point of being completely dry. You want it to be slightly still tacky, but you want it to pretty much feel dry to the touch. It's going to be clear instead of the yellowish color. It'll turn to be mostly a clear color. So it'll become more and more transparent. And when it gets to the point of being almost completely dry, you know it's ready to flip the veneer over and apply it to the surface that you're veneering. So then the next step is going to be, I'm going to take a hot iron and I'm going to run it across the top of it with a sheet underneath it to protect the surface of the veneer and heat the glue up to reactivate it to the point that the bond is going to begin to happen. And you want it to be a strong bond, you want it to last forever, and you want to make sure that the heat is evenly distributed across the whole thing, and then you're ready for the next step, which is going to be trimming the edges. So let's get started on that. Okay, so yesterday we applied the veneer to the tabletop. I let it sit overnight so that the bond would continue to strengthen and it would be thoroughly dry before I start tugging on it. As you can see, we've got some overhang here. I intentionally left that so that I could come back and trim it off. I wanted to just make sure that I got all the edges covered, and then knowing that I would come back and trim that off in the end. So that's what we're going to work on today, is trimming off the excess veneer. And then we'll be at the final stage, which is sanding it, cleaning it up, and then putting the stain on it and finishing it. So today that's what we're going to do, is talk about trimming off the excess veneer and the best methods for that. There are several methods you can use. I know some people are really good with a router, and they can just very comfortably run the router bit along the edge and make a nice clean cut there. So if you're good with a router, that's an option for you, and go for it. I'm personally not comfortable with that, so I don't use that method. Another method is this little doodad here. It is, I'm not sure what its technical term is, but it is specifically made for trimming off excess veneer once you've glued it on. And I bought this one several years ago and used it several times, but I've just never quite mastered a great technique for it, so I don't find myself using it that often, but it is a tool that's available to you to use. The option that I use is just a razor blade. I find that I feel like I have more control over it, and I can make a pretty clean cut for the most part, so that's what I use. I'm a big believer in just using whatever works for you and gives you the result that you're looking for. So what I do is I start further away from where I know the edge actually is, and just remove, and I keep making passes, getting a little bit closer with each pass until I get pretty close to the edge and I can see where I am. What you don't want to do is get into the tabletop surface of the veneer that you've just replaced and damage it. So you can always continue to take more off, but it's very difficult to hide a mistake once you get into it. So easy does it is the way to go, and just have patience, and eventually you'll end up with a beautiful edge that you can be proud of. So let's get started. now that we've removed most of the overhanging veneer, the next step is going to be to come in with a sander and just clean up the edges and remove any last little bits of overhanging veneer that need to be removed and make a nice clean edge there. Also, what I'll do is go ahead and do all the prep work for the final stage, which is staining and sealing. I'm going to be using a product called Rubio Monocoat, and that requires that I use a 120 grit sandpaper. So that's what I'll be using for that. I'm going to sand the entire top, and then also the trim. There's a little bit of glue that's squeezed out, so you want to make sure that you remove all the glue, because if there's any left remaining, it won't soak up the stain and it won't have a nice even finish with the stain. So just make sure you get all of the glue off of it, and any surface scratches that may be on there. Now's the time to get all that cleaned back up and ready for the final stage. Works better with a sanding pad on it.